Hello everybody, here is an optional video on filling out the unit circle. So if we ever have a test or a quiz or anything, you are not going to be given a filled in unit circle. So it's kind of nice just to know where everything comes from so you can start recognizing patterns and then you don't have to write it out every time. So I always start by filling in all the degrees first. So this is 0 degrees. And then let's start with the 45 degree turns. So halfway up to 90 would be 45. All the way to 90 we know is 90. And sorry, I couldn't shrink this, so some of these are going to be cut off, but that's fine. Another half to 45 is 135. And then we know a half circle is 180. And then again, let's just keep doing the 45s. 45 more than 180 is 225. And then 45 more than that is 270. And then another half turn here is 315. And then another 45 gets us to also 360. Okay, so those are all the 45 degree turns. Now let's go do all the 30 degrees. Okay, so this first one here is 30. And then this one is 30 away from that, so 60. And then 30 more is 90. 30 more than 90 is 120. 30 more is 150. 30 more is 180. 30 more is 210. 30 more is 240. 30 more is 270, 30 more is 300, 30 more is 330. And just like that, we have all of our degrees. Okay, now let's jump into radians. So this will be 0 pi radians. Now let's do the same thing. Let's do all the 45s first. So first of all, what is 45? Actually, maybe a better way. Let's do the 180 first. 180 in radians is pi radians. And then if you do a full circle, it's also 2 pi. All right, so let's start there. Maybe a better way to do this is, what's 90? 90 is just halfway, so that would be pi over 2. And then half of that would be the 45, so half of pi over 2 would be pi over 4. Okay, so that means that every 45 is another pi over 4. And now we're just going to count by pi over 4s. 1 pi over 4, 2 pi over 4. This one would be 3 pi over 4. And this one would be 4 pi over 4, which is just pi. This one would be 5 pi over 4. This one would be 6 pi over 4, but reduced. 6 pi over 4 is 3 pi over 2. What are we on? This one's 7 pi over 4. And then to finish it off, 8 pi over 4, which is just 2 pi. Okay, so that's all the 45s. Now let's do all of the 30s. Okay, so all the reds. Now 30 degrees in radians is pi over 6, because 180 over 6 is pi. Okay, so now we're going to go through all the reds. Well, not a little more than that. Okay, every 30 degrees, we're going to add by pi over 6. So this is 1 pi over 6. This is 2 pi over 6, which reduces to pi over 3. This is another 30 here. Okay, 30, 30. This is 3 pi over 6, which reduces to pi over 2. This one's 4 pi over 6, which reduces to 2 pi over 3. This one's 5 pi over 6. And this one's 6 pi over 6. But that's just pi. This one's 7 pi over 6. This one's 8 pi over 6, which reduces to 4 pi over 3. This is 9 pi over 6, which is 3 pi over 2. This is 10 pi over 6, which reduces to 5 pi over 3. I forget what we're on. This is 11 pi over 6, and then 12 pi over 6 is obviously just 2 pi. Okay, so that's how you do all the radians. And now all the coordinates, the cosine, comma, sine values. So I'm going to start with the 0, the 90, the 180, and the 270. And these are just, if this is a circle of radius 1, then this ordered pair here is 1, comma 0. And this ordered pair all the way up here is 0, comma 1. Now this one to the left is negative 1, comma 0. And this one down here is 0, negative 1. Okay, so that should be pretty easy, those four. Now let's get all the rest. I'll get a new color. Okay, so at 30 degrees, if we make a triangle, it's a 30, 60, 90 triangle, right? And you guys know from geometry that across from the 30 is 1, across from the 60 is root 3, and across from the 90 is 2. Okay, so what's cosine? A over h, so root 3 over 2. What's sine? O over h, so 1/2. Now here's the good news. Every angle that has a reference angle of 30, so this one, this one, this one, and this one, they're all going to have the same ordered pair, root 3 over 2, 1/2. So let's do that. Root 3 over 2, 1/2, root 3 over 2, 1/2, root 3 over 2, 1/2. They're all the same. Now, sometimes they're negative, though. So in the second quadrant, the x is negative. In the third quadrant, they're both negative. And in the fourth quadrant, the sign is negative because it's going down. Okay, so that covers all the 30-degree reference angles. Now let's do all of the 45s. I know this is going to get a little crazy, but if you draw a 45, 45, 90 triangle, let me do it over here. A 45, okay, that's a bad picture, but a 45, 45 triangle pattern is root 2, root 2, 2. Some people do 1, 1, 1 root 2. Same thing. Okay, this is just going to have it be rationalized. Okay, so cosine is A over h, so root 2 over 2. Sine is O over h, so also root 2 over 2. And then every angle that has a 45-degree reference angle are all going to be the same. So this one's going to be root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. This one's going to be root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. And this one's going to be root 2 over 2, root 2 over 2. Now let's talk negatives again. In this one, the x's are negatives. In this one, they're both negative. And in this one, the y is negative. Now, for all of the angles that have a 60-degree reference angle, they're all just going to be the reverse of this one. So instead of root 3 over 2, 1/2, all the 60s are going to be 1/2 root 3 over 2, just switching the order because the reference angle is different. So 1/2 root 3 over 2, 1/2 root 3 over 2. Oh, sorry. Let's get our negatives in. In the second quadrant, x is negative. In the third quadrant, they're both negative. And in the fourth, the y is negative. Okay, that's how I do the unit circle. And then when I have a question on a test, I just try to visualize, is it a 30, a 60, or a 45? And then if I can just remember the patterns and how they repeat, these problems are pretty easy to do. Okay, I hope that helped some of you with the unit circle. Thanks for watching.